Any other questions? What's showing up in the chat, Mary Lou?
You have how about this one? Do wood ashes raise pH? Do they
Yes,
contain chloride?
yes, they raise the pH. So if you live in New York, you want to use wood ashes. If you live in California with our high toxicity soils, the pH is high, reflecting the high nutritional status. If you put on ashes, you're going to be raising the pH. It's a liming material you're putting on. When you burn things, you create carbonates, okay? So you have calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, potassium carbonate, plus the chlorides that exist there. And so ashes are a liming material. Now, if you put it on in limited amounts, if you've got a fireplace and you've got 10 acres, it's no big deal. But, you don't want to clean out your fireplace and have a bushel of ashes and put it out around a tree. Well, you might just kill an avocado tree, but it will certainly turn yellow.
How about the question about does rainwater have any minerals?
Yes, that is a good point, especially if you live in Pasadena or in somewhere where there's a lot of car traffic. The nitrous oxides that come off of cars hang in the air, and when we get rainfall, it dissolves and it's carried into the soil. And I forget who did a study at UC Riverside. Jim, I can't remember his name, did a study in Riverside, and he measured the nitrogen in rainfall at Riverside, where these freeways all come together, just south of the campus. And he found in the first, I don't know, half inch or inch of rainfall they collected, there was the equivalent of something like 10 pounds of nitrogen in that water. So that and when you see your lawn, who's got a lawn? I've got a lawn still. I don't irrigate it, but when it rains, boom, it turns green. And partly that's from the dissolved nitrogen that's in the water. It's partly because you bleach salts, but nutrients for a plant are carried in a solution. So you get water in the soil and it dissolves the nitrogen that's present there, and it boom goes right into the plants. So rainfall actuates nutrients that are in the soil already. Plus it carries primarily nitrogen. 80% of the air is made up of nitrogen. So, but if you're expecting potassium or magnesium, calcium, those nutrients are not going to be, well, unless you've got a lot of dust. But, yeah, go ahead.
So we have a question about the nutrient fruit removal, about our essential nutrients that should be replaced on some of these. I can address that one because those values in that nutrient removal calculator was based on a fruit analysis we did from fruit from four different growers in California. It was a mid-season harvest, June of Hass. And we analyzed the peel, the flesh, and the seeds separately. And then we back calculated what percentage the peel, the flesh, and the seed contributed to the total fruit. And I went to Babcock Labs at the time. The values for this came from like 20 years ago. And Ben and Jim Oster vetted the calculations I did because I was very nervous that I had made wrong calculations. But when we had the fruit pulp, the analysis done, I had them run everything that they could run. So are they essential nutrients? I'll let Ben answer that one, but we just had a complete analysis of anything that we could analyze for went into that pot. And those values are the average of those four different growers.
Yeah, there's 17 essential elements that we know of. And So that's NPK, calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, manganese, copper, chloride, hydrogen, which comes from the air, and oxygen. And nickel was only added in 1985. Nickel, and it's in concentrations that are so small that dust can meet the needs of the tree, of the plant. So and then, you know, some plants like the grasses need silicon, which as far as we know is not an essential element. The definition of essential element is that it's a requirement for the total plant to go from germination to growing out to flowering to creation of seed and starting that whole cycle all over again. If the essential element is missing from any one of those stages, it can't complete its life cycle. And nickel was only found to be an essential element after it had been put into a growth chamber where it was sterile, absolutely sterile. And they went through 2 life cycles until nickel became limiting and it wouldn't flower. And I forget what the plant was, but it was Patrick Brown at the UC Davis in the soils department who figured that out when he was a graduate student in Australia. So there's still things to be learned.
So we have a question about leaching, but while we're sort of talking about nutrients, I have a question for both you and Tim. So in Tim's talk, he mentioned the application of foliar nutrients, but I remember back in the day when Tom Embleton and Chuck Labanauskas and Bill Jones were around and Jim Oster was around. And when we were graduate students at Davis and Steve Weinbaum did a sabbatical in Israel, that the conclusion was that applying your nutrients foliarly to avocados is not a good idea. I mean, you can get them on like boron when the tree is flowering, but what do you two say about that?
It doesn't work. It works as a floral application, as you mentioned. You know, the flower is a sponge, it takes stuff up. But the avocado leaf just is very resistant, it's waxy, it's thick. And we did work on nitrogen and specifically zinc. Just, you know, if you can get it into the tree trunk as a trunk injection, or you get it through the root as a, you know, soil application. But if you try and do it through the leaf, it just doesn't work. It works on everything else that we know. It's, you know, citrus and bananas and cherimoyas, but not on avocados. Tim, what's your comment?
Yeah, exactly. And this actually came up last week at the Production Research Committee meeting, that it might be a good demonstration trial to set up at Pine Tree, you know, to treat some trees with foliar nutrients and have untreated ones, and just look at it over a couple of years, see if there's any change in the leaf nutrient profile. That's, you know, yeah, they're a very thick cuticle, very waxy stuff, just gets bound up on the surface and doesn't go in.
It'll be interesting to see how many years you have to run that trial. I remember when we did a nitrogen trial at Cashin down in San Diego, it took 5 years before we saw a difference, and without applying any nitrogen, because there was so much nitrogen in the soil and in the water. So following up on that is, okay, so we'll work on you know, the flushing new avocado leaves.
Yeah,
for foliar application.
So, a brand new leaf will take up stuff, but you know, it's just there for a short period of time. It's and you know, foliar application for any tree crop just is, you have to apply it many times. And so, for example, in citrus, which has a leaf that is more accustomed to taking stuff up, in order to meet the nitrogen requirement, you have to apply something on the order of 25 pounds 5 times a year. You know, and why do that when you can run it through the irrigation system? It's easy.
Yeah, and you know, it will. I mean, the general rule I've heard is, you know, if you've still got those young red leaves out there, you'll be able to get some stuff through those. But you know, even on the best tree, what percentage of the canopy is those young red leaves?
Yeah.
You know, so you're making this application and you're targeting, you know, what, 20% of the leaves on the tree is what you're targeting. Most of your spray is going to go on those mature hard leaves, and it's just going to sit on the surface. So it's extremely inefficient, you know, unless you're doing a bloom spray where you're specifically targeting the flowers, you know, to use as a bloom enhancer. You know, leaves weren't made to take up nutrients, roots were. So put the nutrients where the tree is designed to take them up.
Okay, so we have one other comment still in the nutrient is David Crowley showed optimum potassium levels to be 0.9 to 1.1%, but other sources are sticking to 1 to 3%. What's going on?
Again, if you look at those tables that come from different countries, they still bracket the same range. And the point with those ranges is if you're in that Tim Span's sweet spot, you're sweet, you're all right. And so you can get really picky about some of these things. And I know Jose Maria Ferrer did a lot of work in Spain, and he said he could get down to 0.5% and not see any yield reduction in Spain, 0.5% potassium. You know, potassium definitely is a required nutrient. It's at a higher level requirement than nitrogen, but gosh, potassium is really hard to budge in a leaf analysis. And I don't know. I think the Crowley values are of value, but it's still within the brackets that other countries use. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, so we'll go back to the leaching question. What is the best practice for leaching? That's a very controversial topic, I know.
No, it's not.
No, okay.
So leaching works best when you can get, okay, so soils are made up of a lot of different pores, and there's a pore distribution from big pores to little pores, and water moves through the big pores first. And so because water is not moving through the little pores, that's often where the salt accumulates. And so water moves down through gravity, it's being pulled down, and then it moves through diffusion. It moves from high concentration to a low concentration. And so the first pores to dewater are the big pores, and then slowly the little pores dewater and the salts move out. So the best leaching practice is to put a lot of water on, boom, leach, move soil salinity down, turn the system off, and then slowly the salt diffuses out of these smaller pores into the larger pores, and then run the water again. And maybe do that several times. Okay, so that's the ideal way to do it. And so the closer you can approach something like that, the better it's going to be. So, you know, a lot of people can't do that. You know, they get water delivered every Friday, you know, or you know, they have to share water with the neighbor. And so if you can't do that, the next best thing is to look at periodic leaching. So if you're trying to use the least amount of water to leach, you go to, you do your normal irrigation, 1, 2, 3, and then you know, once or twice a year, you look at the accumulation of salinity using again, one of these EC meters that are relatively inexpensive, and see with each irrigation, how long does it take for the salt to accumulate? And once soil salinity accumulates to about 3 decisiemens, you'd better be on top of a leaching practice. And that's when you can, boom, put an extra amount of water on. And I would say, you want to start with a 20% leaching fraction. Does that do it? Okay, in a drought year, it may not be sufficient. In a rainy year, when we get rain that goes into June, you may only have to do that once or twice in August and September. So every year is going to be different. So the ideal is multiple small irrigations, one following another, and then one where you do a periodic where you accumulate salinity and then you put a big amount on. So anything in between works.
So we have a question for Tim. The comment is that some people say that the gibberellin is too expensive. Do you know the cost of the material?
I don't know what the current cost of it is. I'd have to just call around to a few places and find out.
Yeah, but I think even if you're getting a 10% boost in your yield, it still may be cost effective. And if you have a low crop, as the data that you show,
Yeah.
and you can get a bigger boost. So you have to make a decision whether that cost offsets that increase in production you're going to get.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if you can target the bloom, appropriately and get that yield bump, it definitely pays for itself. I mean, it's, but I think the challenge has been, particularly in the last few years since we've had it registered, we've had some really crazy blooms that have been really strung out. And so targeting the bloom at the appropriate time to get a good effect has been the challenge. And unfortunately, okay, someone just popped up $182 per gallon in 2022. So, you need to get what? That's for a gallon. You need 12 ounces, 12 and a half ounces per acre. So I'm not going to try to do that math really quick in my head, but it's, figure in the application cost, whether you're doing helicopter or ground. So, material and application, I don't know what, $100 an acre or something, probably. So $18 an acre for material. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty minimal yield bump that you'd have to see to make it pay for itself.
Yeah, so I have one other question about the productivity versus the jib. So the data that Carol collected shows that when you're in an off year or low crop year, you get a larger boost in production. So if you theoretically, then would you expect that over time you would modulate alternate bearing so that the difference between off and on would become less?
No, that was never seen. Like I said, you get that bump in both years. It doesn't exacerbate alternate bearing, but we didn't see any evening out. Now, I think the longest trial was maybe 6 years. So, it's possible, I guess, that it could take longer than that to even out, but yeah. Not in the time span of the data that was collected, that wasn't seen.
Okay, great. So let's see, there's 2 other questions here. Here's one. Emmy Lahav conducted many years of research on potassium in Israel and concluded that you didn't need to add it. Ben, do you have a comment?
Yeah, every place is different. This is not New York. This is not Israel. And so you work in the environment that you find your trees in. And yeah, and I learn something every day. And Arnon Dag from Israel was at the Avocado Society annual meeting last October, whatever. And he made the comment that they'd done a bunch of studies where elevated potassium levels, not extraordinarily high, but normally high potassium levels in avocado nectar really dissuaded bees from collecting the nectar, from visiting the flowers. Mary Lou, you were part of that. You want to make any comments?
Well, it was. We went in thinking because avocado nectar has high levels of perseitol and perseitol in the nectar. The theory going into that project was that it was the perseitol that turned the bees off. But Sharoni Shafir is the one that led up that work, and he found in the literature, you know, onions have a high level of potassium in the nectar, and bees are turned off to onion nectar. And so then they modulated the potassium in the avocado nectar, and were able to demonstrate to their satisfaction anyway that it was probably largely the potassium in the nectar that turned the bees off rather than the perseitol. But the avocado nectar has a high level of perseitol is a flow mobile sugar that is, I wouldn't say it's unique to avocados, but as the name implies, perseitol, it is found in very high concentrations, is similar to analogous to sorbitol and other tree crops. And the work in New Zealand shows that it potentially is a stress modulator. And it's the sugar alcohol form of mannaheptulose, which is the 7-carbon sugar. I could wax on forever on that one, but it turns out that when you follow the sugar content, the sugar, quote, sugar content of the avocado tree, mannaheptulose and perseitol account for most of the sugars in the tree compared to fructose, sucrose, and glucose that is found in other trees. You find those sugars in avocado, but perseitol and mannaheptulose dominate, and why, we don't know. And what is the consequences to the avocado tree? Is that why maybe it's a little bit different than other tree crops? We don't know that one either.
But what does that say about a potassium fertility program?
Pardon me?
What does that mean when it comes to applying potassium fertilizer?
I don't think it has much to do with anything with that. Well, potassium in the nectar,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you need potassium for early fruit growth. So you're going to have the trees stocked with potassium when the trees are in bloom, because you need to have that potassium there to fuel early fruit growth. Now, the other reaction to that to be is maybe the honeybee's not the best pollinator for avocados. We need something else.
Yes.
So we haven't found that something else.
So the honeybees turned off, but the native bees or, you know, hoverflies
Maybe not.
may not be.
Maybe not. So yeah, I mean, great. That is a, you know, I mean, that could go by, you know, and you know what, and honeybees go to avocados when there's nothing else. So let's see what else we have here. Gibberellin has been something that has been allowed by U.S. organic certifiers. European organic certification was not allowed with gibberellin. Is there any update for farmers who want to export fruit?
So I mean, Europe is a non-issue because we don't export to Europe. So, but I don't know what Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, which are our primary export markets, I don't know what their ruling, if they have any, on GA has been. And then the next one about drone applications for GA. I don't know if anyone's tried that. Are any of the application companies even using drones? I wouldn't think it would work very well with a drone, because I don't think you're going to get the same mixing in the canopy with the low volume of water that you would with a traditional helicopter. So I would anticipate that a drone application for GA would not work very well. That would be my guess, because I think the volume is probably quite low, and you don't get that. You don't have quite the same rotor action that you do with a full helicopter to stir the canopy and really get the penetration throughout the canopy.
Okay. How about going back to nutrients, Ben? How about we don't have very much lightning, but can you provide trees with nitrogen when you have thunderstorms?
Lightning, yeah, is, it causes an increase in deposition of nitrogen. But coastal California is, we get lightning about once every 5 years, 10 years. So it's not going to be a significant source for us. But yeah, and this really underscores again, maybe in Spain, Israel, there's a lot of lightning, and that could be taken into account. But this is not Spain, this is not Chile, this is not New Zealand, and you've got to look at what is needed here in California. And you can really start looking at San Diego versus north of Los Angeles as being two very different environments when it comes to soil types and so the requirements. So recommendations that come out of San Diego may not be as pertinent for Santa Barbara as what's done in Santa Barbara itself. So just be alert to where the recommendations are coming from that are being promoted.
Okay, and then in large groves, do we have problems with squirrels and gophers? You betcha. I have a field at UC Riverside. We have had such a gopher problem. It's unbelievable. Outright death of trees. Yeah, it can be a really, really big problem if you're not on top of it. And I had a postdoc who went from being a researcher to a gopher catcher. That's how bad the problem was. So there was a question about why don't we export to the EU? I know that when I was hired many eons ago, we did export to the EU. We're not really doing that now. And the response from Tim was that that's a good question for Ken Melvin. I think we'll stay out of marketing here, but we always need to be open. There might be an opportunity for us to export fruit, especially if we diversified the varieties we grow. Maybe we'll grow a variety that they don't grow someplace else, and we have an export opportunity. So we don't ever know.
I think just as we saw at WAC last year, Mary Lou, Europe is a very saturated market right now.
Yeah.
You've got, all the African countries, Kenya, South Africa can all ship in. Mexico sends fruit there. They've got their own production in Spain. And it just, there hasn't been a program in the EU to build volume, build consumption like we had with HAB in the US. So,
yeah.
If they get turned around and they actually build a program to work on marketing and start building demand, there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of people. I think, I don't remember what the numbers were. Was it like a kilo per person per year is their consumption?
Yeah, it's much lower than the US now.
8 or something in the US and Mexico. So, they have a lot of potential, but without a formal program to make a concerted effort to drive consumer demand, I think right now the market's just too saturated for us to try to get the price that we would need to export fruit to Europe.
How about, do we send very much fruit up into Canada?
We do. I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah, those numbers are sometimes hard to find. I know, like with the citrus industry, a lot of times they're lumped into just North American market, and it's hard to find the volume actually going into Canada.
Yeah, that would probably, Terry Splain, the new VP of marketing at CAC, would probably be able to figure that out, I think. But yeah, I know it's some, but again, I think Mexico's the dominant supplier up there.
Yeah. Okay, going back to gophers. Do hawks or owls or cats help with gophers? Yeah.
Oh yeah, they all do something. It's our gopher guy up at Davis told me once, breeding pair, they have a turnaround time from birth to birth of something like 28 days. So if you look at the calculation, a breeding pair at the end of the year will have 12,000 offspring. And, you know, hawks will take some out, and owls will take some out. Jack Russell Terriers are hell on wheels when it comes to them. But, you know, biological control just can't keep up with the numbers that can be produced. And Mary Lou pointed out that, I mean, in citrus trees, gophers will kill a mature lemon tree in a weekend. You know, it takes longer to kill an avocado tree because the architecture of the root system. But yeah, it takes everything. It takes, you know, 12-year-old kids with their BB guns, and it takes, you know, trapping, and certain times of the year, some things work better than others. But yeah, you know, encourage hawks and owls as much as possible.
Yeah, so we have a comment here. I was working in avocados in Chile. At present, I work in avocados in New Zealand, and the environmental conditions are completely different. Even within the orchard, we don't achieve the same results using the standard fertilizer program. We adjust it to the soil type, slope, orientation. Avocados need a lot of micromanagement. Great comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So do we have any other, can caging the root area help prevent gopher damage when you plant young trees? We tried that. We tried that because we were replanting trees into the orchard at UC Riverside. It sort of helped, but not really that much. But it did, and the cages are very difficult to deal with. And it was a nightmare. But finally, the agricultural operations at UC Riverside got serious about getting the gophers. But yeah, it can be a nightmare. And squirrels can be a nightmare burrowing in the tree, and then they also like to chew on the fruit. We have that problem in Irvine with the tree squirrels. So I can appreciate that. Okay, here's a question, another comment regarding honeybees. Some say it's not a good idea to place honeybees in groves because they compete for the same food that native pollinators need, which has contributed to the decline of bumblebees and other native pollinators. There's not much data to support this view, and consider that there were over 6 million managed beehives in the USA post-World War II, and only about 2.5 million, I assume, managed hives today. So this theory doesn't seem to make sense. You know, I think that would have been a good discussion when we had the session a couple times ago on pollinators. The honeybees do go after anything with a flower, but you know, if we're an avocado grove and we need pollinators in our avocado grove, we don't have the data set yet to prove that the other pollinators around are the ones that are doing the job on the avocados. I think that the project that Ben is involved in with Our Known Dog and the BARD project will help in the future for our understanding of that. Ben, do you want to expand what you're doing on that project?
Yeah, we've been following the presence of other visitors to avocado trees now for 14 years with Gordon Franke. And it's really difficult to associate visitation with yield. But hoverflies by far are the most common visitors in this area to avocado trees. But I mean, there's native bees, there's flies, other, not just hoverflies, but houseflies visiting. So there's a lot of alternative pollinators we don't normally think of. And it's not just other bees, but other insect species. Wasps, a lot of wasps visiting avocados. Not as many as honeybees. So hopefully with this 2-year trial, we'll be able to get a handle on the potential yield impacts of these alternative pollinators. You know, it's the thing to remember is that avocado trees are native to the New World, honeybees are to the Old World. So, you know, something was going on here a long time before honeybees showed up.
Well, and I think, again, if you can prove this, that there's another host, it just argues, again, it's another tool to augment the honeybees. And the other thing is that it argues that you need to keep the diversity in the environment around your orchard.
Yeah, yeah.
The biological diversity is very, very important. We've reached the end of the time. We have one other question about garlic. I can't answer the question about garlic being a deterrent. I don't know, Ben, Tim, do you, or anybody have any insights into using garlic? I don't know how many cloves per tree you would have to put in.
We
Down
did a trial on Perseamite 30 years ago when Perseamite was causing such devastation. And we actually saw an increase in Perseamite when we sprayed garlic. I don't know.
How about gophers though?
Oh, for gophers. Oh, nothing deters gophers. You know, chewing gum. People have proposed not ivory soap, but I forget what the soap was. You know,
I think it was
Yeah.
Irish Spring. I think it was Irish Spring.
oh, Irish Spring, Euphorbia, you know, mountain lion tis, you know, gophers are pretty darn smart. You got to trap them, shoot them, eat them, make them.
I don't know about that.
Oh yeah, tasty.
Well, we have one comment that you can use capsicum against gophers.
I sprayed irrigation lines with capsicum. We had a grower here that was growing them. I made a solution with black latex paint and painted the irrigation lines because gophers, ground squirrels, it wasn't specific to gophers, but it was ground squirrels, coyotes, and gophers, rabbits. And after about 2 months, the capsicum stopped working. It worked for a little bit.
Great. Well, I think with that note, we've hit 11:30. I want to thank everybody for attending. I also think that thank Ben for his presentation on the tools on Avocado Source. Hopefully, if you haven't ever used any of those tools, you will want to go and explore the tools. There's a lot of explanatory information with each of those tools that tells you how they came up with that data. And I also want to thank Tim for giving the talk on gibberellin. It's a very important tool for us here in California, and hopefully we'll get full registration soon and
Thank
be
you
able
very
to use
much.
other forms. The gibberellin. So thank you very much.